G'day, Tragic here, and welcome to my final thoughts for Warhammer Quest, the adventure card game, and particularly the first quest of the campaign, which is A Foul Stench. Now, this is going to be a little bit different from some of my other thoughts videos because it's really too early to judge this game just having... I've actually played the other quests, but as far as the channel's concerned, I've only played A Foul Stench, and you can't really judge the game on that quest because it is very much an introduction. It's a lot easier, and also some of the more interesting effects, card effects from the harder creatures and locations aren't in play. So there's a lot more going on in this game than the playthrough would like to sort of, show off. And you'll see that when I play the other campaign quests as I go through this video series. But what I do want to talk to you about is a couple of issues that this game has. And one is that it feels unfinished. And this is because it was obviously designed as an endless expansion game to add to FFG's ongoing list of endless expansion games. Now, having a game that is an endless expansion game by definition isn't a bad thing. I mean, people like them. I like them. I collect a number of them. I'm trying not to because they're so expensive. But my point is that in itself isn't bad. But what is bad is when the games get cancelled, which is what happened with this quest. See, without going into it, because it's all pretty well known now, but in case this video is from years later, someone's watching it, FFG had a Games Workshop license, and then FFG released a Rune Wars miniatures game, which is almost identical. I mean, it's not really, but it's very similar to Warhammer. So, and GW was not happy about this because they're very protective of their IP, specifically because they're not doing so well. GW could disappear in the next 10 years easy if it's not careful. That's why it's pushing very hard into the video game market at the moment, incidentally. Anyway, the point is they cancelled their deal. They didn't renew their deal or whatever with FFG, so all of Fantasy Flight's Warhammer and 40K and GW products all got stopped. And this killed some fantastic games. Conquest, the LCG, dead on arrival, which is a shame because that was a great game. Disc Wars, pretty much everything with the IP from GW. But more importantly, it didn't affect me, but the RPGs, because the FFG made some fantastic RPGs. They actually just released a beautiful deluxe version of Heresy, which I might buy just for collector's sake. But anyway, the point is, this game got cancelled, and it's so obviously designed to have more stuff in it. And this brings me back to my major point, which is it should have that stuff in it from the beginning. FFG's concept of, we'll milk expansions is a terrible idea, and this is a great example of that idea failing miserably. This game, this little box, should have a couple of campaigns. It should have maybe 3 times the amount of cards, easy. And it just doesn't. And it makes the game almost dead. You can still buy it and have a lot of fun. And there is quite a good fan scene making their own scenarios and cards, which you can download from the Geek. I've actually got a whole bunch of them printed out, so I might show you them next time. New characters or whatever. But really, the box should have had more in it from the get-go. Look at, what's that called? What's it called? Imperial Assault. Imperial Assault's like a Star Wars version of Descent. You basically buy an empty box. It's this gigantic box, and it's completely empty, except for a couple of tiles, a tiny deck of cards, and a couple of miniatures. And yeah, sure, you can buy all this other stuff to fill the box, I get it. But you know what? It should have had more stuff in the box to begin with. Because imagine if you spent, because that was like an expensive box too. I can't remember exactly, but Australian prices with us shipping over the sea, shipping stuff across the ocean to Australia means, board games are like $120 minimum. That's Australian. But my point is, imagine paying that and then the game getting cancelled and just being stuck with that near empty box. And that's basically what's happened with Warhammer Quest. And it's a real shame because the game is actually pretty good. So it bugs me. and it bugs me on a consumer level. The game itself is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I actually quite like this game, especially when you get into the later quests. But as a consumer, it bugs me that FFG chose to release less in the hopes of selling more down the line, but again, the whole thing got cancelled. Seriously, they should have just put more stuff in the base box. I mean, they still would have sold all the expansions. It wouldn't have made a difference, except the base box would have been actually worth buying. Anyway, whatever. The point is that sucks. The other thing about this game, which is interesting to me, is the dice system. I really, really like it. The idea of rolling the dice and having sort of these black nasty dice inside the rolls for any kind of action based on who's engaged with you. It's very, very cool. And it's interesting to me as well is the amount of successes. Now, we worked it out. It's like you got 6 faces on the dice and you've got 1 double and you've got 1 miss, which is actually a shield, which is still good. And so you're looking technically at about 1.6 or something like that chance of rolling a success, rolling 1.6 successes every time you roll a double dice. And remember, you end up with 3 dice pretty quickly. But the thing is, you don't have to take into account is that you get, you often roll, you've got a 1 in 6 chance of rolling explosions, which sort of doubles your chances of rolling singles. So you're looking at 2 to 3 successes, probably 3 successes is the average, I reckon. And added to that, how easy it is to gain the tokens, to add another 2 successes. Man, rolling successes is easy. Now, it seemed completely unbalanced in the first quest because it is an introduction. Later on, when you've got so many monsters following you, and it becomes a lot harder. But even so, coming from games like Arkham Horror and Ghost Stories, where the rolls are so brutal, it feels really mechanical. It's like, oh yeah, do this, roll the dice, I will automatically win, basically, and go off. And I don't like that about the way the dice rolling works in this game. Even though I love the dice rolling system with the black die, I really think that having less successes, or as you get into the later stage, having much more successes required, is what this game needs. And this is right back to what I was saying at the beginning. The design is there, but the problem is because we never got any more quests, we never got more interesting monsters, we never got harder stuff. We're stuck with these easy to kill monsters for most of us, except for the people who print out the custom scenarios. The other issue with this game isn't so much as an issue, but it's something that a lot of people forget. When I speak to people who play this game, most people play it 2-player or 3-player. Some play 4, but 2 or 3. 2 is the most common. And in the rules, it actually tells you that when you play 2-player, you're supposed to play 2 characters each. This game is designed for 4 players. In fact, it is not only designed for 4 players, it is a 4-player game, period. And you can play with less for sure, but the scaling is completely inadequate. It cannot scale at all. It is much harder to play with less characters. And, that gives you a bit more success. I was just complaining it might be a bit too easy to get those rolls. But there's a difference between the design of the rolls being more interesting through difficulty of getting the results and the actual game being unbalanced. Because, think about how we were playing in a 4-player game. You roll your attack, you can have another guy supporting, you can untap your actions, you've got a lot more freedom, you can do things. But when you're playing single player is really hard. So say playing just with 2 characters, you're often going to be tapped out and you have to use actions in a much, much more mechanically precise way. And I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't mind. I don't actually. That's a lie. I don't mind that at all, right? Because I have no problem playing multiple hands. But I see a lot of people play this game with 2 characters and come back saying, well, this is bollocks. I'm on quest 3 and it's impossible. And I said, well, yeah, it's impossible because you're playing with 2 characters and it's not designed to be played that way. So that's something to keep in mind. So all in all, my basic comments about this game is that it's just a missed opportunity. This was a good game with some good design in it. It had huge amounts of potential, But FFG's pricing policy didn't give that game design enough room to thrive in the core set. It requires expansions, which are never going to come. So I can't really recommend buying this game. I mean, if you see it super cheap on sale, grab it. It's worth having in your collection. But this isn't one to track down, unfortunately. My hope is that FFG retains the license to the game itself. I don't know how much of the license they had to give away to a GW to use the Warhammer Quest name. You know, maybe these mechanics are now part of GW. I know that GW, like exploding dice technically, is a GW trademark. But my point is, this is a game that needs a reskin, and a reskin now. They've got some settings they can put it in. They can put it in Rune Wars. They could put it in, well, I'd prefer it in space, so put it in Twilight Imperium or something like that. Same thing they did with Dune. They could retheme this game tomorrow and release it, and it would be awesome. And it would also give them time to tweak it a little bit, because it could do with a little bit of a tweak. But all in all, pretty damn good game. And I'm looking forward to the next quest, which I will play on the channel soon. So, keep posted, and I will see you guys next time.